Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the MTS portion of the plenary here. I want to thank you for attending, and I hope you had a great day yesterday. I'm just here to kick off this meeting, and I'm going to welcome one of our technical chairs, Jana Lahi, up to the stage to introduce and get everything started. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jana Lahe, and yes, I'm the MTS co-chair, and thank you all for being here as part of the LOC. I really appreciate that you're here. A couple of things that I want to say before I introduce Craig is, if you haven't started using the app, please do. And we have got fabulous prizes for the gamification. It's called Oceans Challenge. So get down there, talk to the exhibitors, please, get your codes, and there's a basket full of goodies that's sitting at my house right now, but it will be here for you. Native art, food, Alaska-themed everything. And with that, I'd like to bring up Craig McLean, the Vice President of Government Affairs.
Good morning. I'd like to start off with just a few ideas to share with you that were a result of my impressions from yesterday. First, I want to congratulate and thank the local organizers, because I think this meeting is off to a real bang, and it's done very, very well at a number of different levels. In some of the sessions that I attended yesterday, I saw quite a range of activities and opportunities, and really, what is a professional society other than an opportunity to enrich yourself, to enrich others, and look around the room, bring the young people with us. So every year we see a fantastic level of representation from the Massachusetts Maritime Academy, brought to us by the leadership of some of our colleagues in both professional societies. We have young people from many different academic universities and the like. If you're like me, you're probably a little over 50% of the way through your career. Are you spending enough time trying to figure out who those people are who are going to replace you? And in doing so, these meetings have a lot to do with helping to create that network, helping to recruit and cultivate the talent that's going to one day be in your seat and taking your job. Some of the opportunities I saw yesterday, I would like to just stress the strength of the MTS IEEE relationship and what Oceans is about. We had everything from very detailed technical sessions, which continue on for the next couple of days, but we also had some town hall-like meetings, and I really want to stress the importance of these types of gatherings. For this meeting, for this Oceans Conference to be the place where people can come to exchange ideas, where, in my case, where my day job is with the federal government, it's so much easier for me to come to a meeting like this and listen to what the constituencies, regardless of where from, but for me to call not a meeting here, but for me to attend MTS and invite the opinions of constituencies to enrich my understanding and not have to work around some of the very detailed and legal limits of how I can receive input from the public. So this is a huge strength, and I just wanted to underscore that opportunity and commend the planners for providing balance between the technical sessions and some of the workshops and some of the listening sessions. So with that, where we receive our information as a professional society, once again, to commend the local planners, we have two quite outstanding speakers, and I think you'll be enriched by the interesting diversity of what each of our speakers has to offer. So we have, this morning with us, we have Vincent DeVito, who comes to us from the federal government, an appointee by President Trump and the Secretary of the Interior, Ryan Zinke. And you'll hear in a moment what his position entails and the opportunity for leadership that we see and the influence, if you will, of an understanding of what the marine space is about. It's very much part of his portfolio. But then someone else who's going to come up and thrill you with the nature of his experiences, George DeVito, who has, as I understand it, will embellish this a little bit further. George, I'm sure, will embellish this a little bit further as well. But he's just back from 3 months in a very remote and secluded environment, and adding to a very enriched database that he alone and he personally is responsible for constructing. So if you look at this, where we have, once again, through the Oceans Conference, the strength of a senior government official explaining policy, vision, and opportunity, and also on the balance side is an opportunity to understand some of the local natural resource and natural environment that all of us are very very profoundly impacted by, all you have to do is look out the window and see the beauty of this place, but also recognize the importance of keeping it as we find it. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, and we're honored to have somebody of a senior position as the counselor to the Secretary, and that is Mr. DeVito's position. He's an attorney by profession and has a rather enriched practice in many different areas of law centered in the Boston area, and as I came to find out, if you happen to be a New England Patriots fan, you'll be in very warm company with Mr. DeVito's remarks being offered here. But he is a senior leader in Department of Interior, and he offers policy advice on the very wide and broad area of the portfolio of the Department of Interior, which includes the energy portfolio, and that's principally his focus, looking at onshore, offshore, oil, gas, coal, hydroelectric, wind, solar, geothermal, and even biomass energy. So in constructing an energy portfolio for this nation, given the portfolio of the Department of Interior, I think it's very appropriate that we have here at Oceans 2017 a speaker of his level and the depth of what he has to offer. So I'd like to welcome Mr. DeVito to the stage. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here today. Who here is from MMA? Ah, excellent. So a bit of footnote. One of my first jobs out of law school, I was an attorney in the Massachusetts State House, and I was with the senator from Cape Cod and the islands, and I worked a lot with that institute, and it's an outstanding institution. It's one of the terrific assets of the Commonwealth. Also, before I dive in, I want to make sure that everybody here knows Steve. He is from the Secretary's office as well. He's our director for the state, and talking to him is Sal that is dealing directly with the Secretary's office. So don't be bashful about meeting up with Steve and using him as your asset for us as well. There's no doubt that today and going forward is going to be a transformative part of doing business with this administration for you, I hope, because what I'm going to try and articulate is a little bit of background on Secretary Zinke, a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to go into a policy speech that was prepared specifically for you guys, and then hopefully we can do some question and answers after that. The speaker that you're going to have after me, who came from a remote location, I'll just know I'm coming from the opposite of a remote location. The Department of Interior is adjacent to the mall. It's a few blocks away from the West Wing, and we are certainly in the middle of the swamp, as it's called. And moving my family and taking a sabbatical from the practice of corporate law and joining the administration, working in the swamp, wasn't necessarily on the menu for me. This is not a trophy job, and that's a meaningful point. This is a job for me and a lot of other senior managers in this administration. The reality is I had a trophy job. I was an equity partner in a 100-year law firm, and that is not easy to come by. However, it's important to note that Secretary Zinke is a long-term friend of mine, and we have been having multiple discussions while he was a member of Congress, and before that about energy policy and other sectors as well. But when it came to the point where he was already offered the position to be Secretary of Interior, and then I started talking to him casually about Interior and its energy portfolio, which is something I've also talked to the President about before he was elected during the campaign trail, is that the Department of Interior has an enormous amount of energy holdings that really are impactful to the United States economy. So in the context of the Department of Interior and its energy portfolio, we got to the point that the Department of Interior should have a serious, focused individual in office within the Secretary's immediate orbit to make sure that policy, regulations, market information, other intelligence are applied across the board to achieve the President's mission of American energy dominance. So as part of that, the conversation was to stand up this office, and lo and behold, the Secretary asked me to do that with him. One of the things that's important when you make these decisions to join an administration and move your family with young kids to a little bit different part of the country is you have to be assured that the commitment that this brand new job in federal government that you may embark upon is real, and that the opportunity it provides for those of us that have decided to join are not just window dressing. And one thing that you've heard during the campaign, and one thing that's been loud and clear about this administration, is that the energy portfolio is not something that is taking a back seat to other policy agendas. So I certainly felt confident enough to make the decision to take this opportunity and help the Secretary and the President move the needle quite a bit at the Department of Interior with regards to its energy portfolio. So that's just a little bit of a scene setter. Everybody that's pretty much, I'm not different than a lot of other senior managers within the Trump administration. We all have some type of relatively sophisticated professional background and have come to the government to bring our business back. I'm really a deal lawyer, bring our business background to this administration to help make the government a better business partner. And that does not mean that anybody at any department forgets what that department's core mission is. At Interior, it happens to be conservation. Conservation is the core mission of the Department of Interior. Everything else that we do with that flows from it. So we understand that. And part of my job as being Energy Counselor at the Department of Interior, and why I'm here, is to keep track of where the industry is going. Because as I mentioned, we have a relatively large portfolio. And as mentioned earlier too, it's oil and gas, and there's all sorts of other energy development that could be had on public land. And there's no doubt about it from my perspective that Interior has been at the forefront of driving home this administration's agenda on energy dominance. And it's a big part of that agenda is making things better here in Alaska. And energy dominance, it should be mentioned, is not a political statement. It's an economic statement. You may recall in the early 2000s, folks were talking about energy interdependence. Well, what is that? Well, I know what that is, but I'm not here to talk about that today. Then we moved on to energy independence, which is good. Now we're at a point of energy dominance, and everybody in this room and a lot of folks elsewhere are part of that strategy. Because working in oil and gas, the President understands it, the Secretary understands it, I understand it, is a cornerstone for a lot of folks for the American dream. It offers stability and prosperity to not only the people of the state, but all across the country. And it's done it here for generations. But unfortunately, as I understand it, unemployment here is at a bad level. Worse, maybe, perhaps, than any other state in the country. GDP is taking a hit. So I'll go back to the campaign for a second here. But remember that the President talked about the forgotten men and women of this country. And many of those folks are right here in Alaska. And there's no doubt about it, and those of you heard the president yesterday, his mindset has not changed. He's unshakable. His mindset is not going to change. Secretary Zinke and the president, there's no daylight between them. And so the president has heard you, he's with you, and he's fighting for you right here. The forgotten energy economy is not forgotten anymore. And it's important that folks realize that. And we stay focused on that strategy and that mission, which is really the theme, part of what you're talking about during this event, but is really a strong theme within this administration. And by theme, I don't mean a talking point. I don't mean window dressing. I mean a strategy for energy dominance. And so the government's played a big part in the money and jobs that have been yanked out of Alaska, and they have been sent elsewhere, unfortunately. You know, personnel is policy. I understand that's a cliche, but it's reality. If you're a person, you have some type of agenda. Every day I wake up with an agenda. I go into the office and it gets screwed up by my inbox, right? Well, I stop reading email first thing when I go into the office. I have an agenda, I have things to do. I do it, then I'll get to the emails after I ticked off a few things that need to be done. But that's because there were regulations and after regulations that were really intended or not, or had the consequence for making it impossible for companies to do business here. That means, long permitting processes delayed with wealth creation in this state. As Alaskans waited for projects to come through the pipeline, the state's economy took a hit and unemployment has risen. So think past the oil and gas development. All right, so when projects get cleared, there are many other components that also create jobs. With the money, technology, and manpower needed for things like design and construction, as an example, the benefits begin before even the first drop of oil starts to flow. Bringing back Alaska means bringing back energy exploration. That is why it's important to note that Secretary Zinke, one of his first trips, was here and focused and dealing with all the stakeholders throughout the state. If you recall, it was he and a few others, fill up this pipeline. Well, he talks about that nearly 2 or 3 times a week. It's a reality. And that's part of the reason why we're so optimistic about the future here. It definitely comes down to technology and new ideas. This administration is certainly aware of the technological progress that is being made in the energy industry, and we're excited about it. The technology is obviously a key component to that, not only in the lower 48, but here as well. And while many Americans still do not truly trust technology, because as things go automated, folks lose their jobs and it impacts negatively unemployment. There's a correlation there in a lot of folks' minds. But what we have seen in the oil and gas industry is that technology advances are making things better for workers here in Alaska. Technology has not taken away job opportunities. In fact, what we see is that it's creating them. That's why Secretary Zinke's department is investing serious money in ocean science and technology. For example, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management has invested nearly $1.1 billion in national studies about outer continental shelf energy and marine mineral resource development. Right here in Alaska, this includes nearly $500 million, most of which has been focused in the U.S. Arctic. Our work has included things like physical oceanography, sea ice modeling, observing and tracking the movements of various species and the ecology of the seafloor. This work requires the use of state-of-the-art technology, and we are constantly striving to use the latest in satellite tagging devices and the latest in currents meters and ocean drifters, as well as chemical sampling and analysis sampling systems. These technologies are giving us the science to support management decisions needed for responsible resource development. And that's true. So it's not, a day doesn't go by where we don't seek out scientific or other intelligence to help us make informed, responsible, gutsy policy decisions. I mean, you may have noticed that the Department of Interior has been relatively active. And a lot of that was defense, unringing the bell of, the past 10 or 12 years or so, moving forward without necessarily expanding the footprint, unlocking the tools that have been locked up in the shed for quite some time. In Alaska, there's been about, for example, $500 million of research investment has been provided us the information necessary to support 26 individual OCS oil and gas lease sales, generating nearly $9.5 billion for the U.S. Treasury. That's cash. This is from the lease sales alone. The return on technology investment could be far greater once developments like the proposed Liberty project come online. We're collaborating with this technology, engaging our partners across the government and the military. We work closely with the U.S. Coast Guard, NOAA, and the U.S. Navy. On the economic side, enhanced inspection capabilities from the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement and improved industry practices have unlocked the vast potential of American energy. We're tapping in the resources that have not been accessible to us until very recently. Hundreds of millions, perhaps even billions, of barrels of oil are likely currently untapped in Alaska. More resources means more jobs. American prosperity is at the heart of this technological revolution. But assessing the resources certainly is not enough. Here in Alaska, you know this, higher quality geological and geophysical operations have increased the probability of successful drilling operations. Technology is moving us forward in our strategy for American energy dominance. It's made drilling safer, more efficient, better for the environment, and more profitable. At current oil prices, drilling in the North Slope is only worth it because technology has so lowered the cost of development. Taking stock of what we have, we've come very far, but not long ago we were very restricted in what we could do. Now with things like directional drilling and GPS technology, we're making great strides. We can maneuver and steer, making for more cost-efficient and time-efficient operations. Computing has given us 3D seismic data, giving us faster analysis, more accurate information, and higher quality reporting. With these new techniques and technologies, developers are drilling fewer dry wells, bringing the price down, and making operations less risky. Advancing and fracking are also increasing yields with higher pressures and new materials. Wells are producing more because we're innovating more. And that's a core fundamental of how we're creating more jobs. And that's always been a goal of this administration, even before day one. Because we obviously believe in the dignity of work. We also know that a third of the Alaskan labor force works in oil and gas. Each one of these workers has immense value to the American economy, to the American national security apparatus, and to the global oil and gas market. This administration works every day to safeguard that value and to make sure Alaska will make a comeback. In this way, our administration has set about restoring Alaskan prosperity through American energy dominance. We're going back to the wisdom of folks who believed in conservation and using the land to achieve the greatest good for the greatest number in the long run. We can responsibly develop energy onshore and on the OCS under reasonable environmental regulation and maintain our status of global dominance. For example, just recently, our department successfully held the first lease sale in Cook Inlet for oil and gas exploration and development in many years. It's time to realize the energy capability our different lands and regions offer us. This is all part of an ambitious 5-year plan that the Secretary is putting together to achieve our America First offshore energy agenda. As Secretary Zinke likes to note, under the previous administration, 94% of the Outer Continental Shelf was not able to be touched by energy producers, despite the desire of many stakeholders to have access from industry to native Alaskans. Interior's first step to opening the land for crucial development has been a public comment period, where people are weighing in on what they'd like to see. We understand, and we visit this every day, that just because the government has the ability to regulate and create all kinds of rules does not mean that it has to do so. We exercise something called discretion. The benefit of being at the Department of Interior is that it's a very old department. And it was formed at a time when Congress put a lot of stock into these cabinet posts and didn't necessarily define how they were to operate. So what I mean by that is the enabling language at the Department of Interior gives the Secretary a lot of discretion, and that's something we value very much. Because decent regulation, grounded in thorough analysis and strong science, is certainly one thing. But an administrative state run wild with unnecessary and punitive regulations is a completely different entity, which has no place in the Trump administration. Regulations are not purely there to address political agendas. The latter is what we used to have. And that's what we in the Trump administration have aggressively begun fixing. Everything from opening up land for leasing to reducing the semi-annual regulatory agenda by over 50% has been part of our strategy to jumpstart the American energy sector. As part of our 5-year plan development, we are looking at everything, including the expansive resources in the Arctic, up the North Slope, and across Alaska. It's just a common sense way of achieving the energy dominance we envision. Decisions will be made in the field with local input and not by all those guys in Washington. I support and live daily the President's desire for a renewed partnership between the federal government and investors, ensuring mutual beneficial results with the Department of Interior right in the front lines. It is time to use NPRA how it was originally intended to be used. This is land that is supposed to be used for oil and gas production, but many politicians, not Secretary Zinke, and exuberant interest groups basically took it offline. Secretary Zinke recently signed an order to ignite energy production in the NPRA. Always, we just need to realize that we have new information at our fingertips. That new information makes some of the older regulations unnecessary, and new processes that have brought the industry into the 21st century. The Secretary's order on NPRA does consider new geological and geophysical data to drive our policies. In addition, Secretary Zinke has ordered a review of ANWR to promote development while protecting surface resources. The untapped potential of ANWR is significant, but it is the Trump administration that had the guts to step up to the plate and facilitate production. We're going to develop a responsible plan for responsible development because that is what this president was elected to do. That is the mission. Thanks to the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Zinke, American-made jets will zoom, fueled by our petrol, developed and marketed by Americans. When we have the oil and gas, instead of having to buy it from others, we can add investments into alternative energy as appropriate, and we'll be better off overall. The war on American energy is over. It's way over. Secretary Zinke is implementing the president's goal of America being an energy-dominant exporter. And the steps we are taking at Interior and all the other departments are allowing American businesses to responsibly increase energy supply, meet our demands here at home, and get our citizens back to work. We are proud of our energy resources. We're not ashamed. It's important to know that we believe that the American energy economy will be the tide that lifts all boats. So thank you very much for all you're doing to help make that happen. And if you want, I could do questions, or we can do that later, whatever the program allows. Well, thank you. Okay.
A tremendous amount of energy was spent in Chukchi and overseas over several years, specifically by Shell. And some great lessons were learned. Some mistakes were made, and out of that, lessons learned. Shell is now gone. Does the administration have any workshops or committees or anything set up where we can capture those lessons learned?
The best information that those of us that happen to be in Washington addressing significant policy concerns, believe it or not, from my perspective, doesn't come from Washington. I am frequently out in the field meeting with investors and other stakeholders. The secretary goes across the country meeting with all sorts of folks. And we have found that any type of so-called committee for investigating past bad practices, or what have you, certainly have a role for certain functions, and I'll get into that in a minute. But the reality is, the information we get to the field directly to our ears from those that are specifically impacted are not simply anecdotal conversations. Those are the lessons learned that we bring home. Those are the lessons that are most meaningful to us. I mean, it's not uncommon for us if there's a problem that comes to the secretary's office that identifies a certain hiccup, logjam, policy miscommunication, anywhere across Department of Interior's 12 time zones that gets our attention, we action it ourselves. This is an opportunity to be transformative. We recognize that. The secretary's hands, my hands, Steve's hands, all the senior managers at the Department of Energy hands are dirty. We are not contemplating committee work to get things done. What we're contemplating is getting things done in a responsible and expeditious fashion. However, to bring down supply cost and things of that nature, we do have an ability to form stakeholder groups that allow us to address that. But these, and you'll notice this because we're going to be rolling out a couple in the next few days, Well, one's going to be rolled out in the next few days. We already rolled out one, the Royalty Policy Committee. Those groups are not made up of people from Washington. They're made up from people in every aspect that are actually working on energy development and reaping the benefits from it, including, by the way, the federal government. So lessons learned are impactful to the federal government's bottom line. And make no doubt about it, we understand that as well. Department of Interior, second largest generator of revenue for the federal government behind the IRS. We have a meaningful role in this administration to solve a variety of issues. So, yes, committees do have a role, but we believe that dealing directly with those with the specific experience are more important to us for our year. Okay, I think I ran long, but you can grab me afterwards.
Please join me once again to thank Mr. DeVito for joining us here today. Thank you.